What would you do if your family told you that your 8-year-old kid doesn't share blood, so they don't deserve to be treated like family? And if that night, your child asked you, "Dad, why doesn't anyone love me except you?" How would you answer? I've been through that moment. During my darkest time, when a natural disaster took away almost everything, my own family turned their backs on me. The people I thought would always be there when I needed them proved me wrong. But it was also because of that flood that I finally saw who my real family was. Before I get into the details, thank you for taking the time to listen to our story. Hello everyone, I'm Daniel, a 35-year-old aircraft maintenance technician at Payne Field, located between Mukilteo and Everett, approximately 25 miles north of downtown Seattle. My job's stable and I make around $72,000 a year. Not rich, but enough to support my son and me and pay rent for our little house near the Snohomish River area. I got divorced 5 years ago. 3 years ago, I adopted Lucas. The kid was 5 then, but he'd already been through more than any child should endure. His birth mom abandoned Lucas when he was just 3, old enough to remember the face of the woman who walked out the door and never came back. After that, he went through 2 foster families. The first family gave Lucas back after 8 months because he wasn't a good fit. The second family kept him for a year, then gave up when they had their own biological child. Lucas once told me he still remembers sitting in the back seat of the car, watching the house get smaller through the window, wondering what he'd done wrong. When I signed the adoption papers, I held the little guy's hand and said just one thing: I'll never abandon you. To this day, that's still the only promise I've kept completely. But today's story isn't about Lucas's past. That afternoon, I was working a maintenance shift when my phone kept buzzing. An emergency evacuation alert from Snohomish County Emergency Management. The Snohomish River was rising to record levels, breaking 34 feet and surpassing the 1990 record. All the major rivers in the county, including the Snohomish, Skykomish, and Stalagwamish, were at severe flood stage. The governor had declared a statewide emergency. I asked to leave early and picked up Lucas from school, where he was standing huddled with other kids waiting for his parents. When he saw me, his face lit up. We rushed home, and I could only grab a few changes of clothes, important documents, and Lucas's old teddy bear. That was the only thing the little guy brought from the children's home, for all worn and one eye missing, but Lucas never slept without it. My house was situated in a low-lying area near the river, which was prone to severe flooding. I immediately thought of Mom and Dad's place, about 4 miles east, sitting on the ground about 10 feet higher than where we lived. Blood's thicker than water. In a disaster like this, families must help one another. Who else would? When I carried Lucas through the flooded street to my parents' house, cold water reaching almost to my knees, I had no idea that what was waiting inside would be even colder than the rushing water flowing beneath my feet. I still remember that moment as if it were burned into my memory. We arrived soaking wet, Lucas shivering in my arms. My mom, Barbara, was standing at the door looking out. Her first words weren't, "Are you okay?" or "Get inside. It's freezing." She looked straight at Lucas, then turned to me and asked, "Oh, you brought it with you?" Right at that moment, I felt Lucas's tiny hand grip my collar tighter. The kid didn't say anything, just buried his face deeper into my shoulder. He was used to being called that by now, and that hurt me more than the cold seeping into my bones. When we got inside, the street was only lightly flooded, the front yard still dry. The 2-story house was solid, big enough for the whole extended family to ride out the storm. But just in case the water rose higher during the night, everyone moved upstairs to sleep safely. Inside, I saw my brother Tyler with his wife, Jessica, and their 5-year-old son, Brandon, who was already there. Brandon was sitting in the middle of the upstairs couch, munching on chocolate cookies, crumbs scattered all over the cushions. Grandma was sitting next to him, stroking his hair, fussing over whether he was cold, hungry, or needed her to get him anything else. I put Lucas down on the floor. The kid stood hiding behind my legs, clutching his soaked teddy bear. Mom glanced at him once, then looked away without asking how he was doing. As I walked Lucas past them, Jessica was sitting next to Tyler, whispering something. I caught it's like 2 more mouths to feed. Then they both went quiet when they saw me looking. Tyler gave me a polite nod, and Jessica flashed a smile so polite it was fake. I told myself I was being too sensitive. It's a disaster. Everyone's stressed, and everyone's worried about their own family first. Please don't think about it. The TV in the room continued to broadcast news. The emergency evacuation order had expanded, and over 100,000 people had to abandon their homes. The Snohomish River water levels were predicted to break the historic record from 35 years ago. Images of rescue helicopters, houses submerged in water, and panicked faces kept flashing on the screen. When it came time to assign sleeping arrangements, Mom organized everything real quick. The second floor had 2 bedrooms. The most oversized room was Mom and Dad's. The second room, Mom gave to Tyler's family, with a comfortable double bed and thick comforters. She even brought extra pillows and cushions for Brandon to sleep comfortably. And Lucas and I? Mom just pointed toward the corner of the second-floor hallway, where there were a few thin blankets stacked on top of each other on the wooden floor. I didn't say anything, just led Lucas over there. We lay down. I pulled the blanket over him, trying to keep warm by holding the kid close. Wind whistled through the hallway window cracks, bone-chilling cold. As the house gradually fell into quiet, Lucas looked up at me. His voice whispering so softly I had to lean close to hear. "Dad, why doesn't Grandma hug me like she hugs Brandon?" My throat closed up. I didn't know how to answer. I just held him tighter and whispered, "Go to sleep, son. Everything will be okay tomorrow." But deep down I knew I was lying, and Lucas probably knew it too. That night I couldn't sleep. I looked through the hallway window, trying to see toward our neighborhood a few miles away. In the darkness and rain, I couldn't see anything except the black water swallowing everything up. I'd lost my house, my car, almost everything I'd saved up for years. But I still had Lucas, and I thought I still had family. The next morning, I began to realize I was wrong. Around 6 a.m., I woke up to the roar of engines outside. Outside, rain was still drizzling. The water had risen significantly since last night, flooding almost the entire front yard, with just a few inches separating it from the porch. National Guard pickup trucks were plowing through the street that had turned into a river, loaded with relief supply boxes. Further away, I saw the rooftops of neighbors' houses half submerged in murky water. A kayak was floating around with no one paddling it. Only when you're standing in the middle of flood waters, witnessing nature's fury firsthand, do you truly realize how small we humans really are. Everything you've built your whole life can be swept away in just one night. Around 9 a.m., a rescue boat pulled up to the porch. 2 National Guard soldiers in orange waterproof gear stepped up, carrying a large plastic crate. They counted heads in the house. My parents, Tyler, Jessica, Brandon, me, and Lucas. 7 people, 7 portions. Fair and clear. Each relief portion included 2 500 milliliters water bottles, 1 carton of fresh milk, 1 pack of dry food, and 2 protein bars. Mom took all 7 portions, saying she'd store them in the fridge so they wouldn't spoil, then distribute them later. I figured at least food wouldn't be an issue. 1 portion per person, ensuring everyone receives the same amount. That afternoon passed quietly. My dad, Richard, sat by the window monitoring water levels. Tyler and Jessica were busy taking care of Brandon. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, trying to cook something from the supplies in the pantry. And I sat with Lucas in the second-floor hallway corner, reading him an old comic book I found in my childhood room. Around 3 p.m., Lucas tugged gently on my sleeve, his voice soft. "Dad, I'm hungry." I led Lucas downstairs. In the kitchen, Mom was sitting with Brandon. On the table were several milk cartons from the relief supplies. Brandon was holding an open carton with a straw already stuck in. The kid took a sip, then suddenly scrunched up his face, pushed the milk away, and whined in a bratty voice, "Grandma, this milk tastes awful. I don't like it. I want a different one." Mom smiled sweetly, stroking his hair. "Okay, I'll get you another one." Then she stood up, opened the fridge, and pulled out a brand new milk carton for Brandon. The milk carton the kid had just rejected, half drunk with the straw all chewed up and mangled, she set aside. Right then, she turned around and saw Lucas and me standing at the kitchen doorway. Her eyes swept past me, then stopped on Lucas. She picked up the half-finished milk from the table and walked toward my son with a smile. "Lucas, here, I got milk for you." Lucas looked at the milk carton, then looked at me. This morning, he'd only gotten half a portion of crackers, and his stomach was still growling. He reached out with both hands to take it, saying politely, "Thank you, Grandma." Then, before I could react, Lucas had put the straw to his mouth and started drinking. The straw had Brandon's chewed-up bite marks still imprinted in the plastic, but the kid didn't care. He swallowed several big gulps, like he was afraid someone would snatch it away. I opened my mouth to say something, to ask Mom why her biological grandson got the new carton while Lucas had to drink leftovers. But in that moment, Lucas looked up at me. His eyes were pleading, like they were saying, "Don't make a big deal, Dad. I'm fine. Don't cause trouble." I froze. My throat felt bitter. I swallowed my anger down, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom, next time, can you give Lucas a fresh portion? Everyone's supposed to get their own." Mom didn't turn around, still stroking Brandon's hair, her voice casual. "If Brandon doesn't like that carton, it would just go to waste. What's the big deal? Lucas can drink it. That's good enough." I wanted to say more, but Lucas had finished drinking. He threw the carton in the trash, then tugged gently on my hand, looking up as if he wanted to say, "Let's go, Dad." I took a deep breath, then led him upstairs. When we sat down in our familiar hallway corner, I turned to look at Lucas. The kid was looking down, fingers fidgeting with his shirt hem, like he was waiting to get scolded. I put my hand on his shoulder, my voice gentle. "Lucas, look at me." He looked up, eyes worried. I took a breath, then said, "I'm not mad at you, but I need you to understand something. You're my son. You're not someone who comes second. You're not a guest in this house, and you definitely don't have to take anyone's leftovers." Lucas blinked, his voice tiny. "But Dad, I'm scared of making Grandma sad." I shook my head and replied, "You're not making anyone sad. From now on, if anyone gives you anything, look at it carefully first. If it's something someone else has already used, or something they didn't want, you don't take it. You say, 'I'll wait for Dad. I'll take care of you.' You understand?" Lucas looked at me, quiet for a moment. Then he asked, his voice trembling, "But if I say no, will they hate me, Dad?" The kid's question was like a knife cutting into my chest. I pulled him into my arms, held him tight, then whispered, "Listen to me. If someone hates you just because you won't take their leftovers, then that person doesn't deserve your attention. You deserve to be treated well, Lucas. You deserve to be treated with the same respect as anyone else. Remember that?" Lucas didn't say anything, just nodded against my chest. I felt his shoulders shake slightly, and a warm, wet spot soaked through my shirt. I held him tighter, promising myself I wouldn't let something like this happen again. That evening, after Lucas had fallen asleep, I sat watching him in the darkness. I told myself that the afternoon incident was just a minor thing, not worth making a big deal out of during a disaster. Brandon was still young and didn't know better. Mom was probably just being frugal, didn't want to waste anything. But looking back, that was the first sign I had deliberately downplayed. I had chosen to believe that family would never intentionally hurt each other. The next day, everything started escalating. The morning of the third day since we arrived at the shelter, water had flooded into the house. I woke up to the sound of water sloshing right at the bottom of the stairs. When I looked down, my heart felt like it was being squeezed. The entire first floor was submerged in murky water. The sofa, dining table, and everything were more than half underwater. Small objects floated around, bumping into each other. The smell of stagnant mud, mixed with sewage, rose thick and heavy. The whole family was now crammed on the second floor, with the small hallway serving as a living space for 7 people. Items salvaged from downstairs were piled everywhere. Boxes of canned goods, water bottles, clothes, and blankets. The air was stuffy and tense. Looking out the window, the whole neighborhood looked like a giant swamp. Only rooftops and treetops stuck up above the water surface. In the distance, a few kayaks and canoes belonging to residents wove between the islands that were house roofs. No cars, no roads. We were completely cut off. After yesterday's milk carton incident, I decided I had to be more careful. I found a marker pen in the pile of stuff rescued from downstairs, then sat down to write names on each item in my and my son's relief portions. 2 water bottles, one marked Daniel and the other marked Lucas in capital letters. The dry food pack, protein bars, and everything else are clearly labeled. I arranged Lucas's portion in the corner where we slept, utterly separate from everyone else's stuff. Mom walked by, glanced at me writing names on the water bottles, then snorted and walked away. She didn't say anything, but that look said it all. I didn't care as long as Lucas didn't have to take anyone's leftovers anymore. That morning passed peacefully. At lunch, Lucas got to eat his proper portion, sitting next to me in the hallway corner. Nobody touched his stuff. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking everything would be fine from now on. But around 4 p.m., shouting echoed from outside the window. I ran to look down. A man was paddling a red kayak through the murky water, rowing while shouting, "Can anyone help? Mrs. Thompson is trapped on her roof. She needs her heart medicine urgently." Mrs. Thompson lived alone at the end house, over 70, with chronic heart disease. Her home was lower than the others, and it was definitely flooded almost to the roof. The man paddling the kayak was Bill, a neighbor a few houses down. He kept shouting, "I need another person who can swim. The current's really strong. I can't get her across by myself." I couldn't just ignore this. A human life was in danger. Before leaving, I turned to Lucas. He was sitting huddled in the hallway corner, clutching his teddy bear tight. I sat down next to him and said, "I have to go outside to help rescue Mrs. Thompson in about an hour. Your dinner portion is right in our corner, already labeled. You stay here and wait for me, don't go anywhere. Okay?" After hearing this, Lucas nodded, his voice soft. "I know, Dad. I'll stay here." I patted his head, then climbed through the second-floor window where Bill was waiting with the kayak. And my family? Nobody got up. Dad sat still in the corner of the room, eyes looking out the window like the situation outside had nothing to do with him. Tyler crossed his arms, shaking his head at me with a look that seemed to say, "There he goes playing hero again." Jessica covered her mouth, whispering something to her husband. Then both of them laughed mockingly. And Mom just glanced at me once, then turned back to fanning Brandon, muttering loud enough to hear, "Worrying about strangers, abandoning your own child." I didn't respond. A human life needed help. I didn't have time to explain to people who didn't want to understand. Outside, the scene was even more horrifying than what I'd seen through the glass. The water looked calm but was actually flowing underground very powerfully, carrying all sorts of sharp debris. A large piece of wood floated by, almost ramming into the kayak's hull. Bill and I had to dodge constantly. When we reached Mrs. Thompson's house, water had flooded almost to the edge of her roof. It took us nearly half an hour to safely lower her into the kayak, then paddle upstream to Bill's two-story house, where several elderly neighbors were gathered, waiting for official rescue teams. When everything was finished, I was exhausted. My clothes were soaked in muddy water, and my hands were bloody from several cuts from floating wood pieces. But I just wanted to get back to Lucas immediately. Bill paddled the kayak to take me back. When the boat reached the second-floor window of my parents' house, I hurriedly climbed in. The first thing I saw made the blood in my body feel like it was freezing. My son was sitting in the hallway corner, both hands clutching his stomach, face hanging down toward the floor. Meanwhile, Brandon was sitting in the middle of the makeshift living room, mouth chomping on a sandwich. Next to the kid was a half-eaten apple, a torn-open dry food pack, and a nearly empty water bottle. All of it had Lucas written in black marker, clear and bold. Next to Brandon was a pile of snack wrappers and candy wrappers scattered around, his own food portions long gone. I quickly walked over to Lucas, knelt in front of him, and tried to keep my voice calm. "Lucas, have you eaten anything?" The kid didn't look up, his voice like a whisper. "No, Dad." Brandon said he was still hungry. Grandma said Brandon needs to eat more because Brandon's growing. I didn't dare say anything. I stood up, both hands clenched into fists. I turned to Mom, sitting next to Brandon, trying to control my voice. "Mom, that was Lucas's food. His name was clearly written on it." Mom was unwrapping a candy bar for Brandon. Hearing me speak, she didn't bother looking up, her voice casual. "Brandon's bigger, he needs to eat more." I pointed at the pile of wrappers scattered across the floor, my voice starting to rise. "He already ate all his own food. Look at those wrappers. And my son sits here starving?" That's when Mom finally stopped, slowly standing up. She turned to look at me, her face hardening. Then she said, word by word, clearly right in front of Lucas, "Fine, let me be straight with you, Daniel. Brandon is my real grandson. Real blood." After saying that, she pointed straight at Lucas. "And that thing? It's not blood to this family. You brought it home yourself." That's your problem, not ours. I turned to look at Lucas when Mom finished speaking. The kid was trying to make himself smaller, shoulders hunched, head hanging down, almost touching his knees. His little hands gripped the teddy bear tight to keep himself from crying. I turned to Dad, hoping he'd say something. Richard was sitting in the corner of the room, speaking up with a cold voice. Your mother's right. It's not blood. That's the truth. We tolerated being here because of you, but don't expect us to treat it like Brandon. Tyler was sitting next to his wife in the opposite corner. After Dad finished speaking, Tyler scratched his neck, then said with an awkward tone, Bro, we have to think about Brandon first. He's, real family. Jessica hugged Brandon close, turned to look at Lucas with disdainful eyes, then dropped this line, It's only fair. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at each face one by one. The people I called family. They had just said those things in front of an 8-year-old child, and nobody seemed to see any problem with it. I turned to face Mom, trying to contain my anger. You just said those words in front of an 8-year-old child. You think he doesn't understand? Mom was brushing crumbs off Brandon's shirt. Hearing my question, she waved her hand dismissively. So what? Sooner or later it has to know its place. Each word hammered into my head. I glanced at Lucas, the kid still sitting huddled, eyes looking down at the floor, shoulders shaking in small waves. My son couldn't hold it in anymore, and neither could I. I clenched both hands, trying to hold back words in my boiling anger. Then I looked straight into Mom's face, saying each word, Mom, apologize to Lucas. He's my son. Mom stopped, looked up at me. She blinked a few times like she couldn't believe her ears, then let out a dry laugh. Did I hear wrong? You're telling me to apologize to that thing? I didn't back down, replying, he has a name, Lucas, and you just said those things in front of him. You apologize to my son, right now. My mom's face changed color instantly. She shot up, face red as a beet, neck veins bulging. Her voice was shrill. Apologize? Me? Barbara Mitchell apologizing to some brat who crawled out of nowhere? Have you lost your mind, Daniel? I stood firm, my voice low but solid as a nail in wood. He's my son. You insulting him means you're insulting me. Mom pointed straight at my face, spit flying with every shouted word. My son? My son would never be pathetic enough to pick up someone else's thrown-away child to raise. You want to defend it? Fine. Take that burden and get out of this house. Get out right now. The room fell silent. I looked at Mom, then turned to Dad, Tyler, and Jessica. Nobody opened their mouth. Nobody said Mom had gone too far. Tyler hung his head down toward the floor. Jessica crossed her arms, lips curling into a smirk. I took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. You're kicking me and a child out in the middle of a flood. Have you thought this through? From the corner of the room, Dad coldly spoke up. You chose this, you deal with it. Choose it, then get out of my house. Don't drag this out. I didn't bother responding. I turned around and walked toward Lucas. The kid looked up at me as I approached, eyes red and puffy. I bent down and gently picked him up. Lucas stayed quiet, just gripped his teddy bear tight, and buried his face in my shoulder. Right then, from far away, the sound of a boat engine echoed, getting closer and closer. I recognized it immediately. Derek. He came just like he promised. Derek is my best friend from high school, currently working as a volunteer rescuer for the county. About an hour ago, when I was helping Bill get Mrs. Thompson out of the flood zone, he called to check on the situation. I asked him to come pick up the whole family, which consisted of 7 people. He agreed right away, saying he'd get permission from the station and then head over. Back then, I thought I'd be taking the whole family, Mom, Dad, Tyler, Jessica, Brandon, me, and Lucas. The entire family would leave the flood zone together. But that was an hour ago, before I witnessed everything that just happened. The sound of the boat engine grew louder and louder. In my arms, Lucas still held me tight, silent. Behind me, I heard Mom calling out hopefully, Rescue! Rescue's here. She didn't know the person coming was my friend. And she definitely didn't think I had changed my mind. The sound of the boat engine grew louder and louder. Derek sat behind the steering wheel, wearing a rescue vest, his tense face relaxing when he saw me standing by the window with Lucas in my arms. He waved, shouting, Daniel, over here. Hearing the call, Mom immediately cried out, her voice full of joy. Rescue. Rescue's here. Oh my God. Finally someone came. Right away, the whole family got all worked up. Dad stood up, craning his neck to look out the window. Tyler hurriedly gathered some bags. Jessica held Brandon with one hand and carried a purse with the other, constantly urging her husband to hurry up. And Mom ran to the window, waving while shouting, "Here, we're here." I stood still, holding Lucas, silently watching the scene in front of me. Less than 5 minutes ago, that woman called my son a burden, kicked my child and me out in the middle of a flood. Now she was excitedly waving at the boat like greeting a rescue team from heaven. Life's really ironic. Derek brought the boat close to the second-floor window. He looked at me, then glanced at the crowd of people pushing each other behind me, his eyes asking a silent question. Without waiting for anyone to speak, Mom pushed forward. Her voice rushed. "Thank God. You came at the perfect time. We need to leave right away. How many people can you take?" Derek still didn't answer, just looked at me, waiting. I carried Lucas to the window edge, gently set him down in the boat first. Derek caught the kid and wrapped a dry blanket around him. Then I climbed down after, sitting next to Lucas. Seeing this, Mom quickly stepped to the window edge, one leg already reaching out. "Okay, let me get down next," but I looked up at her, then turned to Derek, my voice calm. "Let's go." Derek nodded, putting his hand on the throttle. Mom stood frozen, her foot still dangling at the window edge. She blinked a few times, her voice lost. "What? Wait, Daniel, what are you saying?" I looked straight into her eyes, my voice flat. "Just 2 people. Lucas and I." Mom's face went pale instantly. She stammered. "2 people? What about us?" I answered, still calm. "This is my friend. I asked him to come pick up my son and me, not an official rescue." Hearing that, Mom looked like someone had dumped a bucket of cold water on her face. She stood stunned, mouth open, but couldn't speak. From behind, Dad pushed forward, his voice furious. "Daniel, don't play games. Tell him to come back right now." I turned to look at him, my voice steady. "You said I choose for myself. I deal with it myself. I'm dealing with it. You and Mom, you deal with yourselves too." Hearing that, Mom stepped all the way to the window edge, her voice starting to shake. "Daniel, you can't leave your parents here." I looked at her, remembering the scene of Lucas sitting huddled in the corner, lips dry and cracked, stomach empty, listening to his own grandmother say he wasn't family. My voice dropped. "You told me to get out. I'm getting out. What else do you want?" Tyler pushed up behind Mom, his voice pleading, "Bro, you can't do this. What about Brandon? He's only 5. I turned to look at my brother, answering shortly, "Lucas is 8. When you all sat there insulting him just now, did you say one word?" After hearing that, Tyler went completely quiet, head hanging down. And Jessica stood in the back, holding Brandon tight, her face pale. The triumphant smile from earlier had disappeared entirely. Now Mom started crying, her voice breaking. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I spoke in anger. I didn't mean it." I looked at her, my voice no longer angry, just tired. "You're not sorry for hurting Lucas. You're sorry because now you need my help. That's very different, you know?" Right then, Derek spoke up, his voice professional. "Ma'am, I've logged your address into the rescue system. Official teams will come when they can. The estimated wait time is approximately 4 to 6 hours. You're on the 2nd floor, safe. No life-threatening danger." Mom whipped around to look at Derek, eyes wide. 4 to 6 hours. Derek nodded, his expression unchanged. "That's right, ma'am. That's standard wait time for non-emergency cases." From the window, Dad roared, "Daniel, you'll regret this." I looked up at him, answering calmly, "Maybe, but at least I won't regret not protecting my child." After saying that, I turned to Derek and nodded. He started the engine. The motor roared to life. Mom screamed, her shrill voice tearing through the night. "Daniel, come back. Daniel." The boat started cutting through waves, moving into the black water. All this time, Lucas had kept his face buried in my chest without saying a word. Now the kid finally looked up, his voice tiny. "Dad, Grandma's crying." I bent down, held him tight, and answered softly, I know, son. Lucas was quiet for a moment, then asked again, his voice trembling. Are we bad people, Dad? I kissed the top of his head, my voice choking up. No, we're not bad. We're just people who finally stood up for ourselves. Hearing that, Lucas nodded, then buried his face back in my chest. His hand was still tightly held to his old, worn-out teddy bear. Mom's screaming got farther and farther away, gradually drowning in the engine noise and howling wind. I didn't turn around. Not once. Ahead, lights from the rescue station glowed dimly through the rain. Derek silently steered the boat, occasionally glancing at me but not asking anything. He understood. He always understood without needing explanations. In my arms, Lucas gradually fell asleep from exhaustion. His breathing was steady and warm on my chest. That night, I lost the family I used to have, but I kept the family I truly needed. Today, a week has passed since the night I took my son away from my parents' house and received hateful looks from the very people who were supposed to be family. My life will change completely because of the choice I made. I know this, and I accept it. My family was rescued late that same night by another rescue team. Derek reported back, saying his colleagues came exactly as the system recorded. I wasn't surprised, because their job is to save people and they did their job right. Nobody was left behind. Nobody was in life-threatening danger. They just had to wait a few hours, like thousands of other people in the flood. My phone was packed with messages. Tyler called me selfish and ungrateful. Jessica texted sarcastically that karma would catch up with me. Mom kept calling and texting things like, I'm sorry, call Mom back. And Dad, he only sent one line, we need to talk. I read them all. Then I blocked each number. No replies, because to me, blood is no longer family. Family is not people who choose to stay by your side, but rather those who choose to stay by your side. My rental house was heavily flooded, and the landlord said it needs repairs for 4 to 6 months. This is also why I'm considering a new place to live, Portland, or somewhere farther away. With my remaining savings and the insurance payout coming soon, Lucas and I can start over somewhere that doesn't carry too many painful memories. But what hurts me most isn't about money or housing. It's Lucas's question last night. When we were lying on Derek's sofa bed, he suddenly looked up at me with red, puffy eyes, his voice trembling. Dad, why does everyone want to abandon me? Mom left me, the foster families gave me back, and now Grandma hates me too. What did I do wrong, Dad? How could I explain to an 8-year-old child that this world has adults who don't deserve to be called adults? That there are people who have children but don't know how to be parents? Are there families that only love conditionally? I could only hold him tight and answer, because they don't know how to love, son. But I believe someday, they'll realize they were wrong. When that happens, they'll have to live with regret. And you'll grow up, be happy, and prove to them how much you deserve to be loved. Lucas didn't say anything. He just nodded and then buried his face in my chest. I held him, gently patting his back until he fell asleep after a long day full of unanswered questions. And me, I lay looking up at the ceiling and realized something important. What I need to do now isn't prove I was right or wrong in my old family's eyes. It's about ensuring this child lives in the love and safety he deserves. Because for Lucas, the losses and trauma over all these years have made him believe he's not worth loving. My job, from now until the end of my life, is to prove to him the opposite. That's the end of my story. Before closing, I have one question. Do you think I was wrong to leave and let my blood family wait for rescue? If you were in my situation, what would you do? Please feel free to leave a comment below to share your thoughts. If the story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you for listening. See you in the following stories. What would you do if your parents asked you to get a DNA test for your daughter, who has different hair and eye color from the entire family line, before giving her a $5,000 Christmas gift? I went through that. My parents demanded it right in the middle of Christmas dinner, in front of the entire extended family, and in front of my own 9-year-old daughter. Right after that, my grandma, an 84-year-old woman the whole family had always respected, stood up and revealed a 55-year secret that my dad had been hiding. A secret that even my mom, who'd been living with him for almost 30 years, had never known about. Before I get into the details of the story, let me say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for taking the time to follow this story. Hello everyone, I'm Derek, a 32-year-old architect in Denver. My story happened last Christmas, the day every kid excitedly waits for Santa, anticipating the secret gifts under the Christmas tree. But for my daughter, that day became a memory I wish I could erase from her mind. My wife Rachel, 30 at the time, is a freelance graphic designer. She chose to work from home so she could pick Mia up from school every day. We live in a small apartment on Capitol Hill, about 10 minutes from downtown Denver. Not wealthy, but warm enough for a family of 3. My daughter Mia was just 9 years old then. She's intelligent, sensitive, and has one trait that makes her stand out in the entire Thompson family line. Copper-red hair and green eyes. Everyone in my family has brown hair and brown eyes. Mia's completely different. Rachel explained that she inherited the genes from her Irish grandma. But for some people in my family, that difference became an excuse for them to whisper behind our backs. They never said it directly, but eyes don't know how to lie. And what worried me most was that Mia was old enough to understand. At 9 years old, she could hear and understand everything. She didn't know how to react. Every year, the entire extended family gathers at my parents' house in Colorado Springs for Christmas dinner, about an hour-and-a-half drive down I-25 from Denver. At last year's Christmas party, my parents announced the party would be more special than ever. They'd be giving out college funds for each grandchild. Sounds like a nice gesture, right? I thought so too. Rachel thought so too. Mia was even excited enough to draw a thank you card for Grandma and Grandpa before we got in the car. We walked into the house at 11 a.m. on Christmas Day, and I had no idea that just a few hours later, my family would never be the same again. Christmas lunch started pretty cheerfully, at least on the surface. Mom prepared a whole feast. Mia sat next to Austin and Haley, my brother Brandon's 2 kids. The 3 kids were laughing and joking, competing to tell each other about the gifts they'd just opened that morning. She bragged to her 2 cousins that Mom and Dad gave her a 72-piece art set. Her eyes bright as she talked about the pictures she was going to paint. Watching the 3 kids snuggle together, I quietly thought maybe this year would be a peaceful Christmas. But I was wrong. After lunch, Dad tapped his spoon against his wine glass, signaling everyone to gather in the living room. Dad's the type of person that when he speaks, the whole family has to listen. He stood in the middle of the room, then spoke formally. Today is a special day. Mom and I want to give you kids a meaningful gift, a $5,000 college fund for each one. Mom stood next to Dad, holding 3 thick envelopes and placing them formally on the coffee table. She nodded with satisfaction, then called Austin up first. The 7-year-old ran up, face beaming. Dad handed over the envelope, patted his head, and told him, "Austin, my smart grandson, when you grow up, you're going to do great things." Next was Haley, just 4 years old. She still didn't understand what was happening, but she just knew to run up and hug Grandpa. Dad kissed her forehead, voice sweet. "Here's our little princess." Tiffany, Brandon's wife, sat below with a bright smile, and my brother nodded in satisfaction, clapping softly. I glanced at Mia. She sat up straight, eyes lighting up with excitement, hands gripping the edge of the red dress she'd picked out a week ago to wear to see Grandma and Grandpa. She leaned toward me, whispering, "Dad, it's almost my turn, right?" I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Rachel sat next to us, also looking at Mia with gentle eyes. But then Dad picked up the 3rd envelope, and instead of calling Mia up, he set it back down on the table. His eyes went cold, his gaze shifting from warm to distant in an instant. As if understanding his meaning, Mom cleared her throat, looked at Mia, and spoke with a forced smile. "Mia, before we give this fund, Grandma and Grandpa need to make sure of one thing." I frowned when Mom finished speaking, sensing something wasn't right. Rachel also sat up straighter, gripping Mia's hand. Dad continued after Mom, his voice hard as steel. "We need a DNA test first, to make sure Mia is really our granddaughter." I thought I heard wrong. My whole body felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water on me. I shot up, looking straight into Dad's eyes, voice shaking as I tried to hold back. "What did you just say?" Dad didn't flinch at all. He looked back at me and answered, "Look at the kid. Red hair, green eyes. Nobody in the Thompson family has those features. $5,000 isn't chump change. We need to know for sure the money's going to the right place." Rachel jumped up after me, one hand still gripping Mia's hand tightly. She looked at my parents, voice choking. "What are you saying? Right in front of her?" Right then, Uncle Wesley, Dad's 48-year-old younger brother, also shot up. He's a high school teacher who has never been married. Uncle Wesley looked at Dad with disbelief, then said firmly, "Raymond, what the hell did you say? This is your granddaughter." Dad whipped around to face him, voice ice cold. "Wesley, this is my family business. You don't have a wife or kids. What do you understand?" But Uncle Wesley didn't back down. He stepped forward, voice louder. "You're saying these things in front of a 9-year-old girl. She's hearing everything. She understands everything. Do you know what you're doing?" Dad waved his hand, shouting back, "I told you to sit down. This isn't your business." And me? I stepped forward, trying to keep my voice calm even though I was boiling inside. "Dad, Mia is my daughter. What's there to doubt about that?" Dad looked at me, then glanced at Mia, his eyes full of suspicion as he replied, "Are you sure? Look at her. Does she look like you at all?" At that moment, Rachel squeezed Mia's hand tighter. She looked straight at my parents' faces, voice shaking with anger. "Enough. We don't need to hear any more." But my parents still weren't done. And Brandon and Tiffany just sat there, not moving a muscle, like this had nothing to do with them. Then Tiffany leaned over to her husband, whispering but loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Maybe just split that portion between Austin and Haley, honey. It's fair, since we're not sure anyway." That comment was like a knife cutting into my chest. I turned to look at Mia. The excited smile on her lips had disappeared long ago. Her green eyes were wide, welling up with tears, lips trembling. And 9 years old, she understood that Grandma and Grandpa were doubting whether she was really their granddaughter, that Aunt Tiffany wanted to take her gift away, and that Uncle Brandon didn't say a word to defend her. She clung to Rachel's hand, voice tiny and trembling. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" In that moment, I saw something in my daughter's eyes shatter. The way she shrank into herself, the way she hung her head like she wanted to disappear from this room. In the corner of the room, my Grandma Gloria still sat silent. She hadn't said a word since the party started, but I noticed her eyes were staring straight at Dad, ice cold. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair tightly, probably holding herself back. I didn't pay much attention then, but thinking back later, maybe she'd decided a lot of things in that silent moment. The whole room seemed frozen. I stood there, gripping the back of the chair, trying to hold back the rage rising to my throat. Rachel held Mia close, her eyes red and puffy. And before we could decide what to do next, Mom opened her mouth and said something else that made my blood boil to the breaking point. Mom leaned forward, then spoke sweetly, but each word sharp as a knife. "We don't mean anything bad. But Rachel had that thing with her coworker back then. The whole town knows. How can we trust? We need proof." I stood frozen, not believing my ears. My mom had just implied my wife cheated, right in front of our daughter. Hearing my mom say that Tiffany didn't miss the opportunity, she turned to Brandon, nodded, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Mom's got a point. Better safe than sorry." At that moment, I turned to look at Mia. She was biting her lip hard, trying not to cry. The moment I saw my daughter like that, something inside me changed. It wasn't uncontrolled rage. It was something colder, calmer. Like when you realize someone isn't worth your emotions anymore. Then I laughed. A bitter laugh rang out in the silent room, making everyone jump and look at me. After the laugh, I looked up straight into my parents' eyes, then spoke calmly. $5,000? You want to do a DNA test on my daughter for $5,000? Dad was about to open his mouth, but I held up my hand to stop him and continued. "Let me tell you something. Since the day Mia was born, my wife and I have been saving a little each month. Some months, Rachel took on extra projects, working nights. In other months, I lost sleep taking on extra work to save money. 9 whole years. I paused for a beat, stepped forward to stand between Mia and my parents, then continued, we've built a $30,000 fund for her. $30,000. 6 times the amount you're using to humiliate my daughter." Hearing this, Tiffany's face went pale, and Brandon just hung his head, staring at the floor, not daring to look at anyone. Seeing my brother and sister-in-law go silent, I turned back to my parents and said directly, Mia doesn't need your $5,000. Especially not if the price is being humiliated in front of the whole family. Hearing me say that, Dad shot up, face red with anger. He pointed his finger at my face and roared, How dare you talk to your parents like that? I didn't back down one step, looked straight into his eyes, and replied, I do dare, because you just told your granddaughter that she might not be a blood relative, in front of her cousins. After confronting Dad, I turned to Mom and asked directly, and about Rachel's coworker that you just mentioned, I know all about it. Rachel told me that very night. A guy sent her flirty texts, and she blocked him the same day. So who was it that spread the story around the whole town? Hearing my question, Mom went pale. She opened her mouth but couldn't get a word out. The room fell into heavy silence. While no one was saying anything, in the corner of the room, I caught a glimpse of Grandma quietly pulling out her phone, typing something, then putting it back in her pocket. However, I didn't pay much attention because I was still preoccupied with other things. I turned back to Mia, sat down at her eye level and took her two tiny, trembling hands. Looking into her tear-filled green eyes, I said slowly, Mia, listen to me. You are my daughter. That will never change. No one has the right to say otherwise. Hearing me say that, she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. After comforting my daughter, I stood up, took Rachel's hand, and planned to tell her we were leaving. But my wife did something that, in my family, no one could have expected. Rachel stood up, and I saw something I'd never seen in 10 years of knowing her. Eyes blazing, nothing left to lose, nothing left to fear. I knew my wife had endured long enough, and that day the last straw had broken. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was cold as steel when she looked straight at my mom's face and asked, The thing with my coworker? You just said the thing with my coworker? Mom was about to open her mouth, but Rachel continued. For almost 10 years, I've been part of this family and tried to be a good daughter-in-law. For almost 10 years, I've swallowed my tears every time I left this house. She stepped forward, eyes never leaving my mom as she asked, Do you remember my first Christmas here? I brought apple pie, my grandma's recipe, baked since 5 a.m. You took one bite and said, I guess you're not used to cooking. It's too different from our family's taste. Then you pushed the plate to the corner of the table, left it there until I took it away, and threw it out myself. Hearing this, I felt my chest tighten. Rachel had never shared the story with me. Mom stammered to explain, but Rachel didn't give her the chance. Rachel took a deep breath, her voice starting to shake as she continued. But all of that, I could handle. What I can't handle is the way you people treat my daughter. She turned to look at Mia sitting huddled on the chair next to me, tears streaming down, then turned back to face my parents. Mia's birthday last year, do you remember? No, you don't remember because you completely forgot. Not one phone call, not one card. But Austin and Haley's birthdays? Restaurant parties, 3-tier cakes, the whole family invited. Hearing this, Tiffany hung her head, not daring to look at anyone. Rachel wasn't done. She pointed at the Christmas tree in the corner. Last Christmas, right in this room, Austin got a $200 remote control car. Haley got a $150 American Girl doll. And Mia, you gave her a $5 box of crayons from Dollar Tree. Still had the price tag on it. Hearing this, my heart felt like someone was crushing it. Then Rachel turned to Tiffany, her voice ice cold. And you just suggested taking my daughter's share and splitting it between your kids. You sat there, watched a 9-year-old get humiliated by her own grandparents, and all you thought about was money. Do you have any humanity left? Being confronted, Tiffany hung her head low, hands twisting together, not daring to say a word back. Rachel turned back to look at my parents, her voice choking. Do you know what she said to me after last Christmas? She asked, Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa like me? Did I do something wrong? 8 years old. She was 8 years old, and she already knew she was being treated differently. She didn't understand why. The whole room went dead silent. No one dared to move. But that wasn't all. Rachel took a deep breath, then continued, her voice trembling. You people look at my daughter like she's evidence of a crime that needs verification. You don't see a good, smart, kind child. You only see her hair color and eye color. After saying that, She knelt next to Mia and held her close. Mia sobbed, burying her face in Mom's shoulder. Rachel stroked her hair, voice gentle but loud enough for the whole room to hear. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetheart. Never. This isn't your fault. Hearing Mom say this, Mia looked up, green eyes red and swollen, voice choked. Mom, do Grandma and Grandpa really hate me because I'm different? That question was like a knife stabbed straight into my heart. I saw Rachel hold her tighter, her tears starting to fall too. In the corner of the room, Grandma Gloria had been sitting silent the whole time. But I noticed her eyes were watching the scene before her with an unreadable expression. Not indifference, not judgment, like she was waiting for something. I stepped forward, put my hand on Rachel's shoulder, and said, "Let's go home." But right then the doorbell rang, and Grandma, who hadn't said a word the entire party, slowly stood up from her armchair. Uncle Wesley opened the door and froze. In front of him was a middle-aged man in a black suit, carrying a leather briefcase, standing on the porch in the winter cold. His shoulders were dusted with a thin layer of snow. Seeing Uncle Wesley say nothing, the man stepped inside, brushed the snow off his shoulders, and nodded to greet the whole room. No one understood what was happening. Seeing the stranger appear, Dad frowned, voice full of irritation as he asked Uncle Wesley, "Who's this? In the middle of Christmas dinner, who invited this person?" Uncle Wesley shook his head. He didn't know either. Right then, from the corner of the room, Grandma slowly stood up. She's 84 years old, back already hunched. But when she stood up, the whole room seemed to shrink. Her voice rang out, not loud but clear. Every word, "I invited him. This is my lawyer, Mr. Harrison." Hearing Grandma say that, the whole room went silent. I saw Dad's face go pale, and Mom just stood frozen. In the silence, Grandma walked to the middle of the room, slowly but surely. She looked straight into Dad's eyes and continued, "I texted Mr. Harrison right when you opened your mouth demanding a DNA test. Raymond, he's right in Manitou Springs, 10 minutes drive away." Hearing this, Dad stammered, voice trembling, "Mom, what are you doing? I don't understand." Grandma held up her hand to stop him. Then she turned to look around the room at each person one by one. Her eyes stopped at Brandon and Tiffany, then at my mom, finally turning back to Dad. After looking around, she spoke, slowly but each word like a hammer blow. "I sat here the whole party. I witnessed everything. I heard it all, saw it all." She paused here, took a deep breath, then continued, I waited to see if any of you would wake up, if anyone would stand up and say something fair." Then she turned to Uncle Wesley, voice softening slightly. Wesley was the only one who spoke up. "My youngest son, the one his brother just yelled at for having no wife or kids. What do you understand?" But he was the only one who still knew right from wrong. After speaking to Uncle Wesley, she turned to Brandon. "I was going cold. And you, Brandon, your niece got humiliated by her own grandparents right in front of you, and you sat there without saying a word, silent like it had nothing to do with you." Being called out by Grandma, Brandon hung his head low, not daring to look at her. Grandma wasn't done. She turned to Tiffany. "And you, Tiffany, you even suggested taking Mia's share and splitting it between your kids. A 9-year-old crying right in front of you, and all you thought about was money." Hearing Grandma scold her, Tiffany went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but Grandma had already turned away. After calling out each person, she signaled to Lawyer Harrison. He stepped forward, placed his leather briefcase on the coffee table, right next to the 3 college fund envelopes still lying there. Grandma looked down at the briefcase for a moment, then looked up and said to the whole room, "I'm 84 years old. I don't know how many more winters I have left to breathe. Could be 10 years or 10 days. Only God knows." She paused here, voice dropping. "I was planning to wait until after dinner to talk about the will. Planning to make it nice, proper, like a family. But after what I just witnessed," she shook her head, then continued with a firm voice, "right now is the most appropriate time." Hearing this, Dad shot up, voice panicked. "Mom, what are you doing?" Grandma turned to look at Dad, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Her eyes so cold that Dad stepped back. He's a 55-year-old man, tall and always acting as if he's in charge. But before her, he was like a child caught doing something wrong. Facing her son, Grandma spoke slowly but with full authority. Sit down, Raymond. Hearing his mother's command, Dad sat down immediately, as if someone had just pressed his shoulders down. Then she continued, voice dropping. I have something to tell you. Something you should have told your wife and kids long ago. But you didn't say it. You chose to hide it. So today I'll say it for you. Hearing Grandma say this, Mom looked back and forth between her and Dad in panic, then asked with a trembling voice, What thing? What are you hiding from me? Raymond, tell me. Dad didn't answer. He sat there, eyes looking down at the floor, hands gripping his knees tightly. While my parents were tense, I looked at Brandon and Tiffany. For the first time that party, both of them no longer looked smug or calculating. They looked at each other, faces full of worry, like they could sense the storm about to hit. The air in the room was thick, heavy. I could hear the wall clock ticking, the fire crackling in the fireplace, and Dad's labored breathing. And what she said next made everything I knew about this family collapse completely. She looked straight into Dad's eyes, took a deep breath, then spoke. Raymond, you demanded a DNA test for Mia because she doesn't look like Derek. You said she doesn't have our family's features. You said we need to be sure before giving her $5,000. Hearing her repeat this, Dad nodded stiffly, then replied, trying to sound firm. I'm just protecting the family's interests. Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. Hearing that answer, Grandma laughed, but the laugh had no joy in it. It was cold, dry, and scarier than any yelling could be. After that laugh, she spoke calmly. Family interests. All right, so let me ask you this. Raymond, almost 55 years ago, when I carried you home from St. Mary's Orphanage in Colorado Springs, did you have our family's features? Hearing her question, the whole room went dead silent, and Dad went pale as a ghost. His lips trembling, he stammered back. Mom, what are you saying? Why would you? Grandma didn't let him finish. She cut him off, voice still calm. You're adopted, Raymond. You don't have one drop of my blood. Not one drop. Hearing Grandma's declaration, Mom's jaw dropped, face white as a sheet. She looked at Dad, then at Grandma, then back at Dad. In the stunned silence of the room, Grandma continued, voice dropping. I took you when you were just 3 months old. One rainy November night, someone left you in a wicker basket at the gate of St. Mary's Church. No letter, no name, just a blue wool blanket wrapped around you. She paused here, took a breath, then continued. I don't know who your birth parents were. I don't have any DNA to test. I know that night, when I saw you in that basket, you looked back at me with those big, round eyes, and I knew you were my son. After a moment of silence, she looked at Dad, voice gentler but still heavy. I raised you, took care of your schooling. I sold my only car to pay for your college tuition. I gave you money for the down payment on your first house when you got married. I gave you everything I had. She paused, then emphasized, and I never once asked if you deserved it. I never demanded you prove you were my son. I just loved you, unconditionally. Hearing this, my eyes stung. Next to me, Rachel squeezed Mia's hand tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. Right then, Mom suddenly turned to Dad, voice hoarse from shock and anger. You hid this from me? For over 30 years. I've been your wife, and you never told me a word? Dad still sat there, eyes glued to the floor, not answering. Seeing Dad's silence, Brandon spoke up, voice shaking. Dad's adopted? So what am I? What is our family? Hearing my brother ask, Grandma turned to him, voice softening. You're still my grandson, Brandon. Blood doesn't define family. Love defines family. Then she turned back to look at Dad, voice hardening. But your father doesn't understand that, even though he himself is living proof. Then she continued, voice full of bitterness. I told you the truth when you turned 18, Raymond. You know it well, but you chose to hide it. You were ashamed of being adopted. You hid it from your wife, your kids, the whole world, for almost 30 years. Hearing Grandma finish, Uncle Wesley, standing nearby, shook his head. He looked at Dad, then spoke sadly. I always thought you'd tell them yourself, Raymond. I thought you'd have the courage someday. But you never did. I stood there, feet like nails hammered to the floor. My head is spinning, and I realized the person who was loved unconditionally despite not sharing blood was demanding a DNA test from his own 9-year-old granddaughter. In that moment, Dad looked up and opened his mouth to say something, but Grandma held up her hand, stopping him. Grandma turned to Lawyer Harrison, nodded to signal him. He opened his briefcase, took out a stack of papers and a pen, and was ready to take notes. Then she looked around the room once, spoke. I already had a will. In it, I divided my assets equally among my children and grandchildren. Fair, decent, like a mother should do. She paused, took a deep breath. The whole room held its breath waiting. Then she continued, but after what I witnessed today, I'm changing my decision. Right now, in front of my lawyer. Hearing this, I saw Dad go pale, and Mom gripped the armrest of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Grandma turned to Lawyer Harrison, then began reading each item one by one. The vacation home in Aspen, Colorado, worth approximately $1.2 million, was left to Mia, which was transferred into a trust fund managed by Rachel and me until she turns 25. Hearing my name and my daughter's name, I was stunned. Rachel squeezed my hand tight. She couldn't believe her ears either. Grandma continued with the second item. $450,000 in savings is split into two parts. Half to Uncle Wesley, the person she called the only one tonight who dared to stand up and say what's right. The other half she donated to a charity protecting children from psychological abuse. In Colorado. Hearing this, Tiffany shot up, asking what about Austin and Haley. Grandma just looked at her once, then answered curtly, I already said it. You don't need to ask again. Tiffany went pale, stepped back, not daring to say more. In the tension, Dad shot up. He pressed her. What about him? He's her son. His voice was desperate, like an abandoned child. Grandma turned to look at Dad, and this time her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were sad. So sad. I felt my heart tighten. She spoke slowly. You are my son, Raymond. I love you. That will never change. But she didn't stop at those loving words. She continued, voice dropping but every word clear. But today you showed me you're willing to hurt a child over $5,000. You were loved your whole life unconditionally, even though you're not my blood. But you couldn't love Mia just because her hair's a different color. Dad stood there, face pale, and couldn't say a word. Mom wouldn't stay quiet. She stepped forward, voice hoarse, threatening to sue because Grandma's old, no longer competent. Lawyer Harrison calmly replied. He said he'd arrange for 2 independent doctors to evaluate Gloria's capacity before notarization. And based on tonight's conversation, he could testify that she was completely lucid, fully aware of all her decisions. Mom stood frozen, couldn't get another word out. While the adults were tense, Grandma slowly turned to Mia. She was still nestled against Rachel, eyes red and swollen, not understanding what was happening. Grandma slowly walked over, then knelt in front of her great-granddaughter. At the child's eye level, she reached out to stroke her red hair, then said gently, Mia, great-grandma's sorry for what you had to hear today. No child should have to go through that. She looked at great-grandma, lips trembling. Grandma continued, voice warm. You are my great-granddaughter. Your red hair is beautiful. Your green eyes shine like emeralds. You belong to this family. No one has the right to say otherwise. Hearing Grandma say this, Mia burst into tears. She threw herself into a tight hug, sobbing and asking if great-grandma hated her, if great-grandma still loved her. Grandma held her tight, voice trembling. Never, sweetheart. Great-grandma loves you, always. That will never change. I stood there, watching my 84-year-old grandma kneeling on the floor holding my 9-year-old great-granddaughter, and tears just streamed down my cheeks. We left the house that very afternoon. Mia slept in the car, head resting on Rachel's shoulder, hands still gripping Mom's tight. I drove back to Denver in silence, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror. My parents' house got smaller and smaller, then disappeared completely around the bend. I wondered if I'd ever walk through that door again. And just as Grandma had declared that Christmas night, everything was carried out precisely as she said. After we left, she returned to Manitou Springs and finalized the new will with Lawyer Harrison. 2 independent doctors confirmed she was thoroughly competent. All procedures were notarized correctly. No one could contest it. As for my parents, the people who prioritized money over family bonds, they had to pay the price for their own words and actions. Uncle Wesley told me that after that night, Mom couldn't forgive Dad for hiding the adoption for almost 30 years of marriage. The two of them had serious problems. The house that was once full of laughter now only had cold silence. My brother's family fell apart differently. Tiffany spent all day nagging Brandon for losing the inheritance. She blamed her husband for not speaking up, for not standing with his parents more strongly. I heard the two of them are talking about separation. Mia gradually recovered. She still occasionally asks me why Grandma and Grandpa don't call anymore. I didn't know how to answer, so I just said that sometimes adults need time to learn how to love appropriately. She nodded, didn't ask more, but I know she was still sad. As for Uncle Wesley, he's still the person I respect most on Dad's side. Even though he received $225,000 from Grandma, he quietly set up a small scholarship fund for orphan children in Colorado Springs. He told me money can't buy peace, but it can help unlucky kids have more opportunities. About Grandma, after hearing about the will, I called to refuse it. I told her we didn't need the house in Aspen, that Rachel and I could take care of Mia ourselves. But she just laughed and replied, "If you refuse, that means you're admitting your parents were right. You're admitting Mia doesn't deserve it." Hearing her say that, I went silent, and I accepted. Grandma still video calls with Mia every week. The two of them talk for hours. She tells stories from the old days and teaches Mia to bake through the phone screen. Those are the moments she looks forward to most. I don't hope for much. I hope Grandma stays healthy, so we can meet when spring comes and walk together in Garden of the Gods Park, as she promised. So when summer comes, Mia can stay at her house for a few weeks, learn to bake apple pie from the family recipe. And today, another winter. Almost a year after that fateful Christmas night with no contact, I sent the DNA test results to my parents' house. Not to prove anything. However, I want to let them know that Mia is my biological daughter, as the paper clearly states 99.99% of the time. But more importantly, I wanted them to understand, happiness isn't found in that piece of paper. My story ends here. If the story taught me anything, it's this. Sometimes strangers love us more than our own blood relatives. And blood is never the only thing that defines family. But before I close, I want to ask you, if you were me, what would you do when your own parents humiliate your daughter in front of the whole family? Could you forgive them? Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video to support me and give me motivation to share more stories. Thank you for listening. See you again.